Okay. Hi, today I'm here with Carol Becker. Thank you for coming. Invited Carol in to talk about some very pressing issues going on in the city. We'd like to cover some budget issues and also talk about some public transit issues. And if we have time, we'll talk about ranked choice voting. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you very much.
Carol's a writer here in town. I think a lot of people know her. And you were also used to be on the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Is that right?
I was on the Board of Estimate and Taxation for 16 years. I worked in the Minneapolis Budget Office for 7 years. I was on the staff of Sharon Sells Belton for 3 years. I worked at the Met Council for 10 years in transportation and transit planning. And then I've been working in human services. I also have my doctorate and I teach public administration, politics, public finance, project management, many things that start with the letter P. So I do that too. So
Okay.
I adjunct teach at a number of schools around the Twin Cities.
So great. I thought Carol would be a great person to talk to about the budget. The mayor is going to put his budget out next week. I believe it's August 13th. So Carol, could you just give us a quick primer on how this works? How does the budget work? The mayor is going to have a press conference, release his budget. Then what happens?
Well, we're going to start at the beginning.
Okay.
So the year closes. It's January and February. They close up the accounting books. March and April, they're looking at how did everything come in and starting to do projections for the following year. And department heads are starting to talk about what changes do we need to make in the budget. The people in the mayor's staff, people are talking to the mayor. April, May, coming up with ideas, starting to put costs together. And then they also create a base service level, which is like, this is the amount of money it will cost us to do the same stuff that we were doing last year, but with inflation.
So I want to ask you a question about that because
Sure.
And I've seen from at least one candidate kind of throw out this idea of zero budgeting, which is, as opposed to saying, I think, instead of saying, well, last year my budget was $1 million and starting there, it's going back to zero and saying, how much do I need for my department, as opposed to starting with the million and building from there.
And so, I mean, zero-based budgeting, it starts with the idea that you're going to have to justify every single thing in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And that you're going to build the budget back up, making a clear choice on every single program that you're putting back in, as opposed to with the base budget, which is much simpler and quicker, is to just say, this is what we're doing, we're going to assume that we're going to continue to do that, and then we'll come up with inflation. And then what we're going to do for the budget is make what are called decision packages, which are little units of decision making to add and subtract to that base. Two different ways of doing it. Zero-based budgeting is a lot of work, but does raise a lot of questions about what's in the budget. Should we continue to do it? Do we have fat that we can trim, excess, or have our priorities changed? Mm-hmm. So let me keep going.
Yeah,
let me get through the rest of.
All right.
Okay, so we're coming up, and it's May and it's June, and we've got a good sense of like if we do nothing more, this is what it's going to cost us, and then can match that against estimates of revenues and start to understand, how much tax increase we might be needing. Are we going to be high? Are we going to be low? What's happening with other revenues, federal revenues, the sales tax, other pieces of revenues. So by June and July, we've got a pretty good sense of where we stand, and then also these units of decision making. We need to add a new program. We don't have enough money. And so by June, July, into August, but usually in July, the mayor is making decisions about what he wants to make the budget look like. And the budget's really important because it really is a statement of values and policy. It is probably one thing that defines what our city is really going to be. What is our government going to be? What's it going to look like? What's important? And so I will also say, I am running into a lot of these people in December that are at these budget hearings like, we're here to fight for our programs. And if you really wanted to get something into the budget, you wanted to be talking to the mayor in May and June, not December. By December, all the deals were cut. Anyway, so by city charter, by August 15th, the mayor must put forward a budget. The budget must include all revenues, all expenditures from all sources. That includes the park board, that includes pensions, that includes any sort of thing that touches the city. He must have a budget. And implicit in that is also a statement of property taxes. How much are property taxes going to have to go up or down? And this is his recommendation. It's the mayor's recommended budget, but it's the only place in the process where the public gets to see. And the hard thing about budgeting is not coming up with wonderful things to spend money on. It's about making it balance over to the money that you're going to take from people. Because
and I don't know if all cities have this, but our city, and I think state, you have to balance the budget, right? Like you can't take the city in debt. Is that correct?
the federal government is the only governmental entity in the country that I'm aware of that is allowed to not have a balanced budget. So you have to force that. And that's hard. It's hard. There's lots of great ideas out there that you just have to say no to, because on the other side of it, you know, how much money are you going to take from me, from you? If you're a renter, you're getting money taken from you too. Don't say, I'm a renter, I don't pay property taxes. You do through your rent. And it's one of the biggest drivers, the cost for your landlord. So, August 15th, which is coming up, the mayor's going to say, this is what I think. And then people start reacting to that. For the property tax piece, the Board of Estimate Taxation, the little goofy board that I was on, has to decide how high the taxes can go, the maximum property tax. So by September 30th, so they'll have a public hearing and they'll talk about it, and by September 30th, they have to set a maximum property tax levy. That means that for the rest of the year, the taxes can't go up. They can go under that, but they cannot go higher than that. Then that gets filed over at Hennepin County, okay? So property taxes, the maximum has been set. The city council will then literally move the mayor's budget onto their floor to amend, okay? And at that point, since they've moved it on the floor, anything that now is gonna go in, that means something has to go out. And a budget is really like a knife fight among different interest groups about what's going to get money and what's not. Everything in the budget is there because some group fought for it. And so if you're going to take something out, some group is going to fight you.
Yeah.
And so we're now moving into the city council, and so they do a lot of public hearings. They talk to the department heads. They do public hearings on issues, and you know, maybe they want to make changes to the mayor's budget. Last year, the city council came up with a list of like 70 different changes that they wanted to make.
I have a question about that.
Yeah,
so the mayor puts out the budget and it goes to the city council. I watched a bunch of meetings. I mean, people can tune in if they want to poke their eyes out.
Yes, if that is who you are, yes.
So I watched some of
me.
and
you.
Each department head comes and kind of gives a slideshow.
Yep.
Talks a little bit about maybe why they're adding FTE full-time employees, or why they need extra money for extra programs. And so, but should the city council and mayor be talking during this time? Because it seemed like last year the list of amendments, the 70 amendments, was kind of a surprise to the mayor. And
Yes.
that seems unusual.
It's really unusual because if the mayor and the city council are working together, then the mayor would be, the city council would be saying, well, we need this and we need that, and you would negotiate before the mayor's budget comes out.
So they should be talking now
They should be talking now. And in fact, when I worked for Sharon Sales Belton, for people who don't know, our first female and first African American mayor, my job was to basically do that deal. So I knew every city council member, what they wanted in the upcoming budget, and negotiated with them. Some of it was, we're just not going to do this for good reasons. Some of this was, we really need to study this. This is not fully baked. Some of it was, yeah, we can accommodate that, or we can accommodate that, but that means we're going to have to cut this. And so we were actually able to pass Sharon Sales Belton's budget one year with 2 changes from the city council, totaling less than $100,000, because we had worked so closely to make sure that the council talked about its priorities early, cut reasonable deals with them, made sure everybody was educated on what those trade-offs were. But that's not what happened last year.
Yeah, so what did? I mean, so the two sides just didn't bother talking to each other, or?
Well, somebody didn't talk to somebody. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it was the far left. It was the far left people on the city council that came in. And I'll be honest, I wrote about this. A lot of these were kind of self-dealing things that I want $150,000 for public safety in my ward. And the problem with that is things that are under $175,000 by state law don't have to be bid. So there was a very strong undertone of the council giving money to their favored groups. And so, there was a lot of that in those changes. And then some of it was, just like virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Robin Walmsley brought one that said, the city of Minneapolis should start funding scholarships for people doing early childhood education. Well, that has nothing to do with what the city does, but for some reason, she decided that's something now that the city should start providing scholarships, and some of that just kind of, I'm sure there was some constituent who wanted it, but
Is it crazy? I mean, this is so an example which I thought was interesting in Santa Cruz, California. They instituted they put a 5% or a 5-cent tax on all sugary drinks, and then the money that generated went into a separate pot from the city budget, and then there was like a kind of a board that could decide how they were going to fund it or how they were going to spend it, right? And so I don't know. It seemed that to me was a really interesting concept. So if you wanted something like scholarships for early education, this other separate fund might be a place for it.
except that's really outside of the bounds of what the municipal functions are.
Yeah.
Like cities do regulate cigarettes and tobacco products overall, alcohol. That's a realm that regulation is theirs. So the city did put on a tax on cigarettes, for example. Well, I think they put in a $25 tax on cigarettes, and I don't think anybody's selling cigarettes in Minneapolis anymore. That is, of course, has done nothing to stop smoking. You just drive out into the suburbs. But that's more in the realm of what a municipal function is. Funding scholarships, especially because people are so mobile. And you have no guarantee that they're going to work in Minneapolis, or going to live in Minneapolis, or going to stay in Minneapolis. It's really not a municipal function.
Well,
But
so
go ahead.
look at one of the things they did. This was many years ago. Is they put I think it's 5 cents per bag. So if you go to the grocery store and you take and I'm not even sure what happens to that 5 cents.
It just goes back to the city.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me finish the rest of the year, okay? So we're coming into September, October. The city council's having hearings, some of those that you went to. They might have, hearings from different groups or things that they want to fund. Somewhere around Thanksgiving-ish, deals are being cut. It's not done in public. It's all done behind closed doors, but the deals are being cut about you want this, I want that, I'll trade my vote. Trading votes is called log rolling, and it happens all the time. Well, I'll vote for your thing if you vote for my thing, make agreements like that. And do we have 7? There are staff that are, like I used to do, that are basically cutting these deals and knowing, again, what everybody wants.
That's the sausage making.
That's the
right?
sausage making, and you never
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
So coming into elections in November, everybody that owns property will get a thing called truth and taxation in the mail. And the truth and taxation statement says the maximum, if this is the maximum property taxes that you have to pay, this is how much it's going to cost you. This is how much your taxes will go up. And if you don't like it, here are when the public hearings are. There's a public hearing for the city, a public hearing for the school board, a public hearing for the county, a public hearing for the Met Council. The really little taxers don't have public hearings like the mosquito control district and your watershed districts, but those are the big ones. And then you can go and protest about how high your taxes are going to go. Generally speaking, however, that's not what happens. Generally speaking, activist groups come and lobby for the things that they want. So there's usually a public hearing late November, early December, most likely the first week in December. And like I said, you have all these people, they're all wound up, they've got their signs, they're going to fight for all of this. And, you know, it's always, like I said, amusing for me because I know everything got cut months ago. And then usually then there is a following hearing or following meeting where they actually pass the budget. They finalize the property tax levy, which then goes over to Hennepin County because Hennepin County collects all the property taxes.
So one question about that, in the role of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I thought it was kind of interesting. There's only 2 people running for it this year, so they're going to be on it, right?
Yep.
Because we have 2 elected representatives.
Yep.
Let's say the mayor asks for 20%. I mean, what are they looking at that they say no, max is 12%? How are they coming at that number that's different from the mayor?
First, when it was me, I stayed up a lot of nights. On one hand, there's a woman that has stuck with me for my whole life. She came, older lady, had lived in her house for 40 years. Husband had died, living on fixed income, and we were taxing her out of her house. Mm-hmm. And then I gave her a ride home to the house that I was taxing her out of. And she has always stayed with me for forever. The idea that we can just raise money and not have it have any impact, you know. But on the other hand, we need cops or people die. We need firefighters or people die. If we're going to have an economy and people are going to be able to build wealth and not be hungry, we have to have jobs. And that means we need roads, we need access to jobs, we need infrastructure, we need water and sewer and all of that. And how do you balance that? When I was on the board, we tried to have hearings and hear from the city and hear from the park board about what their needs were. And then you end up having to just internalize it and you got to make a call. I mean, you're elected to make a decision. And it's an ugly, painful decision, like I said, that kept me up many nights about, do I agree with what's in the mayor's budget? Do I think it's too much? Generally speaking, I always thought that there were a lot of things we could have cut. And not enough respect for hardworking people who, I mean, it's, especially if you're on the lower end, man, a few dollars make a lot of sense, make a lot of difference. I mean, my property taxes right now, I have about the median home. It costs me $500 a month just for my property taxes. That's my base.
So I want to clarify a little bit. So last year, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, I think the maximum they set was at or higher than what the mayor had said. And then the city council came back and created, did their moving around of different funds and stuff. And they basically said they got property taxes down. And so one thing is that the final budget doesn't have to meet the max of the BET.
No, so
but the other part I thought, and I just want to bring up I recently read a piece of yours out by the Minneapolis Times that I found really interesting, because whatever that number is, like let's say they come up with 7%, it seemed like, if I interpreted your article correctly, that may not be what I actually pay in property taxes. Could
Correct.
you walk through that a little bit?
So there's 2 parts to it. One is the levy. The city says, I want to collect $500 million. So then the question is, how is that going to get divvied up between all the 200,000 properties that we have? And how much you're going to pay is, you can think of it as like my percentage of the total of those 200,000 properties. But it gets more complicated than that, because as all the property values are moving, yours can mean that you pay more or you pay less, or your value could go up, but it might have gone up less than everybody else's, and you could see a decline. So it's really complicated for people to understand. But it kind of works like this. It's like a balloon. If you squeeze it down on one side, it's going to pop up for somebody else. So last year, what we saw was that home prices relatively stable, but commercial property, especially in downtown, values dropped, and apartments dropped, especially in places like Uptown. Apartments had dropped. And so as they squeezed down in their value, that means homeowner costs went up. So the city said, we're going to raise the overall levy $500 million. roughly speaking, people. But that's going to be a 6.9% increase from the previous year, and that's about twice inflation. But for the average homeowner, because those other values dropped, their part of the balloon went up. So on average, homeowners saw an 11% increase.
Okay, so that makes sense to me. So just because they say 10% or and that's what we're expecting from the mayor, right? Is going to be 10% or so.
So the city does a 2-year budget. And so implicit in that was the 2026 budget. The 2026 budget assumes a 10.8% increase in property taxes. That is before adding any new programs. And so because we've still seen that decline in commercial and apartments, homeowners are probably going to see 15, 20% increase. And
Wow.
that's only for the city. So in your property tax, like I said, you pay the city, the county, the school board, the Met Council. Roughly speaking, you pay 45% to the city, 25% to the school board, 25% to the county, and 5% more or less to the Met Council and a couple of the other ones.
But when the mayor comes out with
He's
the
only doing the mayor part of that. He's only doing 45% of your tax bill.
So if he says 10%, does that mean that the county and the school board might have additional? So that's
So
or does
last
his
year-
number incorporate all that?
Nope, they are separate.
Okay.
School board is separate. The county is separate. The Met Council is separate, and they do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're only talking 45% of your bill that could go up 15 to 20%. Then the county will do something different, and the school board will do something different. So last year, I want to say this county did 5.5%. Again, twice inflation, more or less. The school board, on the other hand, went for a 12.3% increase. And so when I say 6.9 is what the city council adopted and homeowners saw 11, that's only for your 45%. For that school board number, you saw into the twos, most likely, 20% increases in those.
Yeah.
And the school board coming into this year, so if the city said 10.8, the school board settled with its unions for really huge salary increases. And that money's going to have to come from somewhere. So you can expect that you're going to see another huge increase from the school board. And then the county's talking about whether or not it wants to take back HCMC, because HCMC is not providing enough money to cover its costs. So then you could see the county having a big, huge increase too. And like I said, for me, I mean, I just a working schmuck, but it's costing me $500 a month just in my property taxes. And so how much more expensive do we make the city? You know,
Yeah,
I hear these people talk all the time. We've got to do things. We got to make housing affordable. You know, the actions that the city and the school board and the county are taking are making the city unaffordable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be such an interesting part of the conversation after this budget comes out to see what all the other mayoral candidates will say about what their priorities would be. And of course, you know, whatever the Frey comes out with, people are going to pick it apart as they should. I mean, I want to make sure that the city is spending the money properly.
Yep.
So, and I just want to summarize, because it went by pretty quickly, that point you made earlier about just because they say it's 10% when the mayor comes out, that he's not saying your property taxes are going to go up 10%. He's saying the general levy is going up 10%. And I thought you explained it really well. They still need, after that point, to look at the different values of the property to figure out how do they make that full 500 million or whatever it is. And so if your property went down, you might be paying less, and if your property value went up, you might be paying more. So because I think people get confused, I know I do.
Right.
When he says 10%, I expect my property taxes to go up 10%.
No.
But that, from what I'm hearing, that's not exactly right.
In fact,
Yeah.
I can pretty much guarantee if he says 10.8%, your taxes aren't going to go up 10.8%. It will go up something different.
Yeah.
And the question is, like I said, the change in your value compared to all the other values, because like I talked about, like commercial has declined and apartments have declined and homes have kind of hung in there, so that means more burden is shifted onto them. We also see this changing burden around the city. The fastest growing home values are up in North Minneapolis.
Right.
And so that means as more burden shifts onto North Minneapolis as opposed to maybe Northeast that is not seeing those increases. And so
do you have any theories as to why that's happening? Why? I mean, is that because more investment is going into North Minneapolis and the area is improving? Is that why values are going up, or?
I think North
maybe
Minneapolis.
Maybe that's outside your realm.
No, absolutely. No, one is I think gentrification is occurring.
Okay.
Two, there have been a lot of, because the values of properties were low, private equity have bought up homes and have been able to then basically raise, I mean, if it cost you this much to own it, they're actually able to charge this much for rent. And make money on the deal and make good money on the deal. I think another problem is that the city since 2009 has added a bunch of housing, but not in a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. So if you are a black family, and black families are twice as likely than white families to have 4 kids, for example. I mean, we've built no housing for these people. And so we really are forcing them into this rental, especially up in North Minneapolis. And so that drives up the price because private equity will pay more than a regular person to make money on that.
So is that a area that the city should step into, is somehow making investment rules around private equity and what they can do? Because it sounds like
there's been some conversation around it, but I think the bigger problem is that the city is not producing ownership housing. 95% of the housing built since 2009 has been rental property. And if you want, I mean, there's no better way to make somebody poor than to have them rent. Mm-hmm. And we have one of the worst home ownership rates between black and whites. We have black people in Minneapolis are poorer because they never build any equity, you know? And I'll be honest, I mean, I came from a poor family. I started with literally 2 pairs of jeans and my dad dropping me off at college. But I was able to buy a house, and that's built equity. My mom, you know, she worked at Kmart for 20 years, but North Dakota had a low-income housing program that got her into a very inexpensive condo with a really good rate, probably still why she's alive. Minneapolis has done none of this. Mm-hmm. Minneapolis has done none of this. I was at the Planning Commission just a couple days ago, and they're approving yet another 34 units of rental housing, and it's like there's no better way to keep people poor, and it almost at times feels deliberate, to be blunt.
So you don't have to answer this, but I'm curious, when you look across our mayoral candidates and their different plans for I mean, everyone says they want to lower the cost of housing. Do you think one candidate or the other stands out as having a plan that makes sense and would improve home ownership and stuff like that? But if you haven't made a decision, you don't have to talk about that.
I'm not gonna recommend one or the other. What I'm going to tell you is that Omar Fatah is for rent control. Rent control is proven to drive up the cost of housing because nobody wants to build in a city with rent control. And so the where we want people to be in ownership housing gets more and more expensive, mm-hmm. which is just really bad policy. Frey, to his credit, came in 8 years ago, said, we're going to build at least. So, mm-hmm. so one of the ideas, if you build a lot, at least you can bring the cost down. And so has invested huge amounts of money into affordable housing to the point where if you talk to like Wellington, I mean, advocates don't like to say this, but if you talk to Wellington, who's provided a lot of those units, they're like, we can't fill the studios and 1-bedrooms anymore. We have built a lot of that kind of studio 1-bedroom housing. Our housing problems are really for families with children, and that's completely different, and we haven't focused on that. But families with children overwhelmingly are in single-family homes, which we then took away mm-hmm. the zoning protections from. So I don't know where they expect kids to live in our city, and in fact we're seeing the population in Minneapolis decline, not because we have lots of empty apartments or houses, but because there are fewer children per family.
Well, and when people So you raise really a good point there. I mean, I think with the 2040 plan and a lot of what you hear is they want high density housing near transit, but a lot of times that's directed towards people with like no families, right? At least the way they build it. And so it seems like a lot of families, at least statistics that I've seen, are moving out into the suburbs where they can get a house, a full house.
Right, but also have a place to put. I mean, kids come with a lot of crap.
Stuff, I know.
And
I
you
know.
have to have places to put the stuff. You know, do you have your kids running around screaming in your apartment, making all your neighbors mad? No. We just have not produced housing for families. And that's really where our housing problems are right now. But it has to be ownership housing. And then you think about who's the poorest people in our society. Persons with disabilities, number one. Children, number two. Half the kids in Minnesota, their births are paid for with Medicaid. We're not focusing on that at all. And if I were to fault all the candidates, and thank you, Jacob, a ton of affordable housing produced. If you care about affordable housing, Jacob's your guy. But we really now, we've had 8 years of that, great. We now need to focus on this ownership for families with children problem.
So I only have about 5 minutes left here, but I wanted to ask a little bit about transit. Where does MDOT fall in the whole budget? Is it when the mayor comes out with the budget, does MDOT cover that? Our public transit?
Who do you mean by MDOT?
Well, that's what I'm hoping to figure out, or that's a state thing. So our buses that we see on the streets.
So up until 1967, the Twin Cities Lines was a private company, starting about 1890 to about 1967, 1968, depending on exactly what point At that point, it was taken public, and it became the Metropolitan Transit Commission. It was a standalone organization, separate and all by itself. It had a property tax levy, not within the full 7 counties, but within most of the cities in the 7 counties, and subsidized itself through this property tax. That in about 1985-ish was merged into the Metropolitan Council. So the Metropolitan Council now runs the transit system, also runs the sewer system, does the land use planning, and does regional parks, among many other things. And so the Met Council now runs that. Now, they do not have an operating levy for transit, but they have a capital levy to pay primarily when you get grants from the federal government. They're usually 80-20 or 90-10. That means that 10 or 20% needs to come from local sources, so property taxes can provide that. So, but the operating costs primarily are not through property taxes anymore. That was also a change. I'm saying then, when we passed the amendment. So, okay, I'd have to think about exactly when that was. But most of the operations for transit are now paid for through the motor vehicle sales tax, as well as Metro Mobility is paid through the state general fund, and then federal grants. When you get your gas tax, a portion of your gas tax, when you put gas into your car, goes to the federal government and then comes back to transit.
So, wow, that's a lot of history.
Sorry, I'm going
I didn't mean to rush you through it, but
we can do another. We can do this again.
We could come back and talk about this. And the reason I'm asking is because they just put out the performance metrics, and ridership across the bus lines and stuff is down 7%, which I find, I guess, disheartening, because we've invested so much in these rapid transit lines. And so, and you hear a lot of people talk about it in terms of the city. And so I'm trying to kind of figure out, well, what responsibility does the city have in promoting public transit and getting our money's worth out of these really substantial investments? They've got more police on the lines now. They're doing fare control, which some people have suggested has driven down the numbers. I've seen people suggest that because of the ICE activities, less Hispanic people are taking the bus. So I'm just, maybe you could summarize, like, where does the city responsibility for these bus lines and things fall, and where does, I guess, Metro
Met
Council.
Council.
Yeah, the Met Council.
So by and large, running the transit system is the Met Council's responsibility, and the city has nothing whatsoever other than it sends some advisees to some committees at the Met Council. And the Met Council is governed by people from different districts. We have a couple of appointees on the Met Council itself, but by and large, the city of Minneapolis has nothing to do with transit. The big piece of it that the city does have is public safety around the transit. So, for example, over on Lake in Hiawatha, you can go today and see open air drug dealing.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I took the Orange Line downtown for quite a while, and it was a fantastic bus. But it was I always had a seat or a row to myself. I mean, it was never more than half full,
and you have a big, heavy diesel engine. I mean, people think that like angels on wings carry the buses around. It's a polluting, heavy diesel engine vehicle that is mostly empty most of the time, driving around, getting half a gallon to a mile to the gallon. So
that can't be right. Is that right? A mile to the gallon? I mean,
yeah.
I don't understand how.
Yeah, these are really heavy, big vehicles. And so, and a trip, I just did the math. If you take, I know though people telling me this isn't true. Take the operating cost for transit plus the capitalized maintenance, which is everything that isn't a transit way, new starts, new programs, divide it by the ridership, the 2025 budget divided by the 2024 ridership. It's $23 a ride.
23
one
a
way.
ride.
So
yeah.
$46
for me to take the bus.
For you
downtown.
to take the bus. So was it worth it to society to pay $46 for you to take that trip? And especially if we're talking about, because you're like, well, why do we have transit, which we can do another one of these, but because there are some good answers and some not so good answers. But if you were poor and I said, I will give you $46 if you find another way to do this ride.
Yeah, find a ride. Yeah.
That would massively increase the income for, if you're talking really truly poor people. And if once a week they needed to go to the grocery store and they took that $46 and went on an Uber,
yeah,
society would be way farther ahead. So we should talk about why do we have transit, what the costs are, because there's this idea that we're going to somehow become Manhattan and everyone's going to take transit everywhere. And of course, transit is wonderful for the environment. And once you start to look at those things, it's not true.
Well, I think we could probably have a whole conversation just on this train line that is supposedly going from Eden Prairie to downtown, and
that cost us $3 billion. I mean, and nobody's going downtown.
That to me is a head shaker. I mean, just the expense, the overruns, why they decided to route it right through the lakes. So I hope you'll come back and we can talk about that one too, because I've heard a lot of people questioning, why couldn't we just do buses, right? Like high-speed buses.
Or that we were already doing buses, that Southwest Transit was already doing buses, and that in fact the light rail will take longer to get people from the suburbs into downtown than the buses that were already there. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
and
that makes you wonder.
Buses are flexible and light rail is not. And these BRT lines are the same thing, that they will stop once every mile. That's great. I used to have a bus stop 2 blocks from my house. Now it's 8 blocks. Well, do you think I'm going to go hike my way over to? No.
But what is it, the blue line, I think, the train from Eden Prairie, but or green, I forget.
Just use the name of the line, because I'm old school. Like I said, I worked at the Met Council for 10 years, and so I'm like Central, Hiawatha, Southwest.
But,
no.
It just boggles my mind that we have really an unaccountable body, the Met Council, because they're all appointed by the governor, right?
Yep.
And that they seem to have really lost any sense of cost control on that, and the timelines and yeah. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on how if the Met Council needs to change, should it be elected? Should it be folded into another government agency? Have you thought about that one at all?
So I worked there for 10 years. I literally did the plan the light rail system is based on, so I know a little bit about this. I literally wrote chapters of the regional plan. And by and large, the Met Council is run by staff. And the board is just mostly just rubber stamping. And so to me, there's this really, and we can get into this question, democracy doesn't always produce a lot of good outcomes either.
Yeah, that's true.
And we're looking at the mess that Minneapolis is right now. We're looking at the mess that the federal government is. Those are democratic outcomes. And so it's kind of this fundamental question. Plato didn't believe in democracy, which kind of freaked me out for a while. And he said that it will either be taken over by the mob swayed by their emotions, or by rich people who are just buy their way into power, or the rich people swaying the mob. And so his answer was what he called the philosopher kings, smart bureaucrats. And smart bureaucrats were a better answer than democracy. And the Met Council in the Twin Cities kind of represents that question of smart bureaucracy. Is that better or worse than, I mean, some of the democracy that we're getting is kind of a shit show.
Yeah.
And so which of those is better? If I thought voters were all rational and logical and well-informed, and 3 out of 5 Americans can't tell who's in power in Congress right now.
Well, I will say, I when we started this conversation, I had no idea that we were going to end up at Plato.
With Plato?
So that's wonderful, and it's a great topic that maybe we'll have to explore later. I hate to rush the end of this.
No, that's all good. We'll come back and talk Plato and the mob, and I'm working on some pieces on that now. So
great, thank you.
All right.